And at a pediatrician's office I talked to, they are having people come in the side door. They're having well kids be seen during the morning, sick kids in the afternoon, really trying to keep those patient groups apart. But on the front lines, they are kind of making it up as they go, it seems.
Hi, I'm Scott Leadingham. Thank you for joining us here in the unique Northwest. Oh, what a difference a week makes, or a day, or an hour. A lot of news and a lot of changes in a short amount of time, and it's not all coronavirus related, although a lot of it is. Here to talk about some of it is Olympia correspondent Austin Jenkins. Thank you for joining us today, Austin.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So we'll throw out this caveat. We are going to avoid specific numbers since they change a lot. And with everything going on, they could change again as we tape this and you watch it. So with all of that said, Austin, in all of your years covering the legislature and state government, is this one that will just stick out forever news-wise?
Probably so. And as you said at the top, you know what a difference a day makes or a week, but what a difference 60 days made, because when the legislature came into session in January, coronavirus was not top of mind. It was something that was happening somewhere else across an ocean. And the focus as they came in January was very much on homelessness and on housing. That was the big number one topic. Recent polling had showed it was top of mind for voters, and it was really a priority for both Democrats and Republicans. And then by the end of the 60 days, we had been enveloped in this coronavirus crisis. Legislators were appropriating emergency spending out of the state's rainy day fund for that, and our reality had completely shifted.
But I'm curious generally, how do you think state agencies were prepared going into these past few weeks? Like, are the structures of state government even set up for something like this? For example, to suddenly have thousands of people working remotely?
Probably the short answer is no. You know, for so long we've been talking about what would happen if we had a subduction zone earthquake, a 9.0 that completely devastates the state and state infrastructure. A pandemic like this has not been something that has widely been thought about. I know public health officials worry about it all the time, but this is representing a dramatic and very fast change of business as usual. And what you're finding is that state agencies are handling this in different ways. I mean, we're seeing notices even at this point about how state agencies are changing their practices. So labor and industries, for instance, going to appointment-only basis as of our conversation now. But other agencies have already, closed off their facilities to visitors, or entire state agencies like the Attorney General's office and the State Auditor's office have ordered everybody to work remotely. Of course, it's easier in some settings than others. The state still needs to run a prison system. Correctional officers, people who work in the kitchen, have to show up to do that work. You can't do it remotely, and that's one of the complexities here. Is it just depends on the nature of the work. For some agencies, pretty easy to do. For others, frankly, impossible.
You reported a story recently that was striking, a kind of window into some of the decisions being made on the front lines of hospitals and healthcare systems in the region. Things like canopies in the parking lot and separate entrances for symptomatic patients. I mean, you'd think it was a movie if it weren't real life. Can you just talk about some of those decisions that are being made?
Well, it's interesting, and I don't know if it's reassuring or terrifying to think that individual clinics, for instance, and individual doctors and nurses and clinic directors are having to get creative and improvise, but that's exactly what's happening. And it's also interesting how the guidance that they're getting is sort of all over the place. I heard yesterday from different doctors that the best practices were if a patient who was suspected of having COVID-19 was in their practice in a patient room, that you should leave it for an hour and then sanitize it. I also heard you should leave it for 2 hours and sanitize it, and I heard you should leave it for 3 hours and sanitize it. So I think that the healthcare professionals on the front lines are getting a lot of mixed messaging, not clear guidance, but they are also being forced to figure out, well, what do you do? And think about a doctor's office where they have this existing relationship with their patients. They are their clients. They want to serve them in a time of need. They don't want to wave them off. Well, but they also have to think about all of their staff and all of their other patients. So what do you do? So in the case of one of the clinics down here in Thurston County, they are meeting people out in the parking lot. They did buy canopies so they can set up more of a of a structure or a setup so people can drive up and get tested. And at a pediatrician's office I talked to, they are having people come in the side door. They're having well kids be seen during the morning, sick kids in the afternoon, really trying to keep those patient groups apart. But on the front lines, they are kind of making it up as they go, it seems.
All right, and let's move back to the recently adjourned legislative session. Is it fair to say things didn't quite end up where lawmakers and the governor thought they would even 60 days ago or 30 days ago? You mentioned that earlier, but just give us a sense of that.
Probably it's a combination of yes and no. I mean, coronavirus didn't completely derail the legislative session, and they kept doing their work right up to the end until adjournment. And this all came about as the session was winding down anyway. So what was notable is, in the end, they appropriated out of the rainy day fund $200 million. It started out at $100 million, and then they doubled it on the last day of the session. And those were unanimous votes in the House and Senate. Democrats and Republicans, everyone agreed this was an emergency, and this is why the state has an emergency fund. So they did that, but they also kind of stuck with their agenda, continued passing non-coronavirus related bills right up to the end. They did pass a supplemental budget, which is an update to the state's 2-year operating budget, transportation budget, and capital budget. And then there was a whole bunch of policy in there as well. So for most of the session, most of the 60 days, it felt like a normal session. It was right at the end that things got strange. They pushed on through. We kept thinking they're on borrowed time here. You know, if somebody has a suspected case of coronavirus, it could shut this place down, but they got through to the end without that happening.
Could you give us a quick overview of a few of the bills that died, that didn't pass? And it might not be the bills you may think, given there's a Democratic majority in both chambers, Democratic governor. I'm thinking specifically of things like on clean fuel standards and the death penalty. Those died.
The governor's top priority probably prior to this coronavirus crisis was that he wanted this clean fuels, he calls it, or low carbon fuel standard bill. It's something he pushed for last year as well. In fact, he was talking about it when he was first elected and first took office in 2013. And yet it was a case of deja vu. It got through the House once again, but died in the Senate Transportation Committee, where the chair of that committee is not a fan of this policy. And really what it involves is requiring the refineries to blend a less carbon intensive blend of fuel so that then it's less carbon polluting, something that California already has in place in British Columbia. So that didn't go through despite the governor wanting it very much. The death penalty repeal we thought might have a better chance this year. It's passed the Senate now 3 years in a row with bipartisan support. It was not something that former Speaker of the House Frank Chopp was really keen on doing. But the new Speaker of the House, Jenkins, has, I believe, co-sponsored the death penalty repeal bill in past years. I think she heard it when she was chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House, and yet it did not come up for a vote. What was different this year is the entire House Democratic caucus caucused on it behind closed doors, but it didn't come up for a vote. Jenkins said there were a number of reasons for that. One of them was that there is a House Republican member whose sister was murdered by, and you said that we would have the moment in this recording, in this
got a kid
conversation
in
when the child opens the door, comes in, because we're all working and schooling from home. So that was Sophie. Hi, Sophie. So the death penalty, one of the reasons that the speaker said it didn't come up is because there's a House Republican her sister was murdered by the Green River Killer. And recall that the Green River Killer confessed to a number of those murders and helped lead investigators to the bodies of many of his victims when they negotiated with him taking the death penalty off the table. And so the speaker said that was one consideration, that she doesn't want to cause people kind of undue pain. On the other hand, she said this issue is not going away and that she'll be looking for ways going forward to repeal the death penalty. I do just want to mention that the death penalty has been ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, at least as it's applied, and yet it is still, though, on the books.
Right, and good to see your family at home with you. Thank you for being a working dad, working parents. All right, but it's right. It's not completely out of the question that a special session could be called by Governor Jay Inslee to address other things, whatever those may be, coronavirus or not. Or is that just not anywhere in the realm of possibilities from where you stand?
Well, I think it is in the realm of possibility, as depending on where this coronavirus epidemic goes. Now, for the time being, given all of the restrictions on large gatherings, the feasibility of bringing the legislature back to the Capitol. I mean, it would be in direct violation of the governor's orders that groups of 50 can't be together. So could they all meet remotely? They've never done that before. It's 147 legislators, 2 chambers. I think that there'd be a lot of complexities to doing that. I'm not saying that under really extreme circumstances that would never happen. But since they have this $200 million appropriation and the governor has a tremendous amount of power now that he's declared a state of emergency, I think that a special session might be more off in the future. But I certainly wouldn't rule it out. And if things get a lot worse quickly, and he does need the legislature to do something, appropriate something, or give him more authority, then they'll have to cross that bridge when they get to it. But I don't think it's imminent.
Well, it's kind of interesting, just real quickly, because the whole kind of point, or one of the things about a short legislative session, which this year was that it's an election year. So they get it done quickly, then they all go out into campaign mode. So that could be disrupted. Their campaigns are probably going to be disrupted anyway because of everything going on. But for them to be called back in the middle of when they ostensibly should be campaigning would probably not be a thing that they'd be too keen on.
Well, it also triggers a freeze in their fundraising abilities. Of course, I don't know that anybody's thinking about campaigns and elections and fundraising right now because of what's going on. And, it's easy to forget that the governor is running for a 3rd term. The president obviously is running for re-election. But suddenly there is such a focus now on coronavirus. I don't know. It's going to change how elections are run for the foreseeable future. I think that probably a lot of campaigns are retrenching and thinking, okay, how do we turn this into an all digital, all virtual campaign if we can't have our candidate out glad-handing and giving speeches, and we can't be encouraging our supporters to get together. So, yeah, that's all scrambled. But you're right, coming back into session, there are many reasons why that's probably, there are hurdles to it. But in a time of emergency, if they have to do it, they'll have to do it, and they'll have to figure out how to do it.
Certainly interesting times in which we are living, and you're there to help make sense of it and cover it for us. In Austin, they say there's no rest for the weary or the wicked, and I don't know if either of those apply to you, but you certainly deserve at least a little nap after all of your reporting recently.
Well,
Keep it up.
I'm sitting on a couch here, so
yeah, good
don't
thing.
tempt me.
Yeah, benefits from working at home. You can take a quick nap, and thanks for joining us today, Austin.
Thank you. Be safe.
You can see all of Austin's reporting on these and other topics at nwpb.org. Thank you for joining us here in the unique Northwest.